In this video, I want to talk about why late diagnosis reframes decades of misunderstood relationship friction in a neurodiverse marriage. Have you ever looked back over your neurodiverse marriage and wondered, uh, what if we weren't actually fighting each other? What if for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you were both trying to solve the wrong problem? Wouldn't that be a hell of a note? What if the arguments weren't really about love or commitment or selfishness or stubbornness or narcissism? What if they were about something neither of you even knew existed? So today I want to talk about something that changes lives, a late diagnosis of level 1 ASD. Because for many couples, that diagnosis doesn't just explain the present, it completely reframes the past. It doesn't erase the hurt, I understand. It doesn't magically fix years of pain, but it finally gives those years an explanation. And sometimes an explanation is the beginning of healing. Wouldn't that be great? Now, one of the hardest things about living in a neurodiverse marriage is that behavior is easy to see, but invisible neurological differences are not. For years, the neurotypical spouse may think, well, they just don't care, or they're emotionally unavailable, or they're impossible to talk to, or they're choosing not to understand me. Meanwhile, the autistic partner is often thinking something completely different. He's thinking, I honestly don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying as hard as I can. Every conversation feels like a test I didn't study for. The goalpost keeps moving. Why do I keep disappointing the person I love? Two completely different experiences living inside the exact same marriage. Now, here's what I've learned after working with countless neurodiverse couples. Most marriages don't fall apart because two people stop loving each other. They fall apart because both people create explanations that fit what they can see. If someone forgets an anniversary, we assume they didn't care. If someone walks away during an argument, we assume they are avoiding responsibility. If someone doesn't respond emotionally, we assume they're cold. Those conclusions feel logical, don't they? Until we understand the brain. Let's talk about something that nobody else discusses. Sensory gating. It sounds technical, doesn't it? But the idea is actually pretty simple. Your brain is constantly deciding what information deserves your attention and what information can safely be ignored. Think of it like the spam filter in your email. Without it, everything arrives at once. Every notification, every advertisement, every junk message, every important email. Now, imagine trying to answer an important email while 10,000 spam messages keep appearing. That's exhausting. And for many autistic adults, that's surprisingly close to what everyday life feels like. Now, imagine adding an emotional conversation about your marriage. Your spouse is talking, you're trying to understand their words, you're noticing the tone in their voice, the lights feel brighter than usual, the shirt feels uncomfortable, the dishwasher suddenly seems incredibly loud, your heart rate starts climbing, your thoughts begin racing, old memories of conflict come flooding back, nothing is being filtered efficiently anymore. Your nervous system is overwhelmed. Now, from the outside, your NT spouse sees someone who looks emotionally distant, but inside the ASD brain, it feels like trying to land 50 airplanes on one runway. Those are two completely different realities. And this is where decades of misunderstanding begin. The neurotypical spouse naturally thinks, well, if you loved me, you'd stay present. Or if this mattered, you'd answer me. Or if you cared, you'd show more emotion. Now, those conclusions make perfect sense if you assume both nervous systems process the world the same way, but they don't. Sometimes what looks like emotional withdrawal is actually neurological overload. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. And explanations change everything. Imagine reading the last chapter of a mystery novel before you've read the rest of the book. Suddenly, every strange clue makes sense. Every confusing conversation, every unexplained event, every character's odd behavior, nothing changed about the story, but everything changed about how you understood it. That's what a late autism diagnosis often feels like. For years, one partner may have believed they don't care, they don't listen, they're emotionally unavailable, they're controlling, they're impossible. I remember working with one couple married for over 30 years, and the wife told me, I always thought he didn't love me enough to stay in difficult conversation. And the husband quietly responded, I stayed away because I thought if I spoke, I'd make everything worse. Now, notice something important here? Neither motivation was cruelty. One experienced abandonment, the other experienced panic. Both suffered, both misunderstood each other. This is why so many late diagnoses brings tears. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because people finally have language. Language changes everything. Instead of you're impossible, the conversation becomes, oh, your nervous system overloads more quickly than mine. Or instead of, you don't care, it becomes, oh, you process emotional information differently. And instead of, you're choosing not to understand, it becomes, we've been interpreting the same event through different brains. That's a profound shift. Now, I want to be very careful here. Understanding is not the same thing as excusing. A diagnosis doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't remove accountability. It doesn't mean harmful behavior suddenly becomes acceptable. No. If someone has repeatedly ignored your needs, the hurt is real. If you've spent decades feeling lonely, that loneliness deserves to be acknowledged. Validation matters. Healing requires honesty. But accountability becomes far more productive when it's aimed at the actual problem. You can't solve the wrong problem. So for many years, many couples have been trying to fix character when the real issue involved nervous system differences. How about that? One of the greatest gifts of a late diagnosis is that it removes unnecessary shame. The autistic partner often says, oh, I finally understand why I've always felt different. I finally know why relationships exhausted me. I'm not lazy. I'm not stupid. I'm not intentionally uncaring or narcissistic. And the neurotypical partner often says, oh, I guess I wasn't crazy after all. I wasn't imagining these patterns. There really was something happening. I wasn't asking for too much. Notice both parties receive validation there, not just one. Both stories matter. Now, there's another important piece we need to understand. When something remains unexplained for decades, our brains automatically create explanations, don't they? That's what humans do. We fill in missing information. If your spouse repeatedly forgets emotional conversations, you assume they didn't care. If they avoid eye contact, you assume they're hiding something. If they miss subtle emotional cues, you assume they're self-centered. The brain hates uncertainty, so it creates certainty, even if it's wrong. A diagnosis doesn't rewrite history, but it can rewrite the meaning you've attached to the history. Think about that for a moment. The events stay exactly the same. The anniversary that was forgotten, the vacations filled with conflict, the holidays that ended in overwhelm, the social gatherings that became exhausting. Those memories don't disappear, but the explanation changes. And when explanations change, emotions often begin changing too. Not overnight, not instantly, but gradually. Resentment often softens into curiosity. Blame slowly gives way to understanding, and fear begins making room for compassion. Now, compassion doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. No. Healthy compassion says, I understand why this happened now. Healthy accountability says, now that we understand it, what are we going to do differently? Those two questions belong together. Understanding without change leads to more frustration. Change without understanding rarely lasts. Healing requires both. So this is why I encourage couples to stop asking, who's right? And start asking, what happened inside each person's nervous system? That single question right there changes the direction of almost every difficult conversation. Instead of debating motives, you begin exploring experiences. Instead of defending intentions, you begin describing nervous system responses. That creates safety, and safety allows learning. One of the most beautiful moments after a late diagnosis isn't dramatic. It's usually pretty quiet. It's when one spouse looks at the other and says, wish we'd had known this 30 years ago. Almost every couple says some version of that. And yes, there is grief. Grief for the lost years. Grief for the unnecessary arguments. Grief for the loneliness. Grief for the opportunities that were missed. But grief isn't the end of the story. Grief is often the beginning of a new story. Your marriage doesn't have to be defined by the years before understanding. Those years matter. They're part of your story, but they don't have to write the ending. A diagnosis doesn't tell you who your spouse is. It explains how their brain has been processing the world all along. That's an important distinction. The goal isn't to replace love with neuroscience. The goal is to let neuroscience support love, to replace assumptions with understanding, to replace blame with clarity, to replace confusion with compassion. And perhaps for the first time in many years, you replace hopelessness with a shared roadmap forward. Now, if today's discussion resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What was the moment that made your relationship finally start making sense? Your story may be exactly what another couple needs to hear today. And if you're navigating a late autism diagnosis in your marriage, subscribe to the channel. Remember this, a diagnosis doesn't change the past, but it can completely change the meaning of the past. And changing the meaning is the first step towards changing the future. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Hey, this is Mark Hutten. Would you like to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call? Okay, it's so simple. Just look under any of my videos in the description area. Click on this Calendly link. Now you see my calendar. Pick your month, your day, anytime that's available. Enter your name and email address. Then you'll get a follow-up email with the Zoom link on the day and time that you picked. And voila, we will talk.